And then it just kind of came to this point of like, dude, just be a man. You messed up, and all you can do is just own it and move forward. And by owning it, repenting.
In this episode of For Goodness Sake, I have on my longtime friend and brother in the faith, Aaron Moreno. We've weathered many storms together throughout the years and have held each other up like real brothers should. We chat about the growing pains of life and what it looks like to own up to its challenges. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Dude, you were a victim of the knockout game or something like that, weren't you?
I was.
You lived in LA for a period of time.
Yep. I got knocked out. Blackout.
You literally got blacked out.
Yep. I was by a brother.
By a brother.
Yeah, I was a victim of knockout.
Straight up.
I was walking to work and I had my headphones on. And it was 11. Well, so I had to be at work at 11. I remember that.
So you used to walk to work, to Apple, in LA.
In LA. Felt so safe. Brittany would leave the doors unlocked all the time. Felt so safe. Now I would not. But back then, we just...
This is pre-2016.
Yeah. This was...
It's 2016,
we
2015.
moved back 2016. End of 2016? I don't know. So, yeah,
it was 2015, 2016. I remember this. Yeah.
Yes. And I ended up just walking to work, wearing my headphones, and someone out of the blue just knocked me out.
Where was he? What was he? I mean, like, thinking back, was he just like sitting on the sidewalk?
I don't even know. I never saw him. So I was walking. So there's this path that I would take that was a little bit faster, and I didn't have to cross as many lights, and it was more residential. But I will say it was across the street from a park. And this park definitely later on, like when we first moved there, it was a wonderful park. Got infiltrated with a lot of, transients. And I imagine he came from that park.
Look up a knockout game on YouTube.
Okay.
Give a good example.
And I'll tell you this park. It's called Pan American Park. And awesome park. Awesome park. And it was crazy. So that park was there. And then right next to it was CBS Studios. Big studio. So I rocked in between that, got to one of the most high-end shopping centers in LA. And I just remember having my headphones in my backpack. And before you know it, I'm like, my ears are ringing. I'm laying on the ground. I opened my eyes and this guy...
Where did he hit you?
He hit me in the back of my head.
Straight in the back of your head.
Yeah, I don't know what he hit me with though. So I don't know if he hit me with his fist or he had a backpack. So I wasn't sure if he hit me with his backpack. I couldn't tell.
And no idea why.
So I woke up. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Knockout game. Boom. That was me. That was basically me.
Oh, jeez. So what it is, for those that don't know, is innocent pedestrians just walking on the sidewalk will just get hit indiscriminately by thugs for fun. Because it's funny or something.
Yeah, I think the goal was to see if you can knock someone out.
One hit.
Yeah, one hit, knock out, fall over, like not fight back.
Yeah.
And so I think the guy was surprised that I came to consciousness because I opened my eyes and I looked up and he was standing over me. And I think it freaked him out. Like that was a weird thing is I was like, okay, I have my backpack on. I got headphones on and my phone. That's about it. Nothing too crazy. I got hit. I fell to the ground and I just remember like opening my eyes and my ears were ringing and this guy was standing over me. And then I looked at him and said, "Why'd you do that?" And I think I don't even know why I said that. Like out of all the questions, "Why'd you do that?" And he was just like, "You're in my way." And he was definitely, I don't know like what his deal was, but my perception of him was that he was a transient, maybe he was homeless, I'm not sure, but he just took, so I got up and I think that freaked him out and he took off running. And I did a stupid thing and chased after him. So I chased after him and so the way it worked is there's this alley literally right before the parking structure to the place I worked. So he ran down this alley, I chased him and he like just took a little left into this parking structure and I just couldn't find him. But man, it was the timing was rough because my wife and I were going through just a lot at that time. We were about to foster.
Yeah, that's right.
So we were in the foster care process and we had like a very invasive home study process. And there was just a lot going on. Like life was crazy, busy. And that
you ended up running into this guy later though, right? Like
so
you saw him at Whole Foods or something like that?
Yeah, well, I saw someone who I thought was him, and I imagine he kind of hung out in this area. So LAPD had a station at the shopping center I worked, and so I like filled out a police report and everything like that. And they're like, "Well, we'll keep an eye out on him and stuff, and see, I don't know. There's not much we can do, basically." So I was like, "Okay." And then I remember seeing a guy that was like, "I think that's him," and then kind of just being like, "Dude, I mean." I didn't even know what I would do. My only thought,
punch him.
Yeah,
well, I don't even know it's him.
Yeah, I was like, if he's gonna do this to me, he might do this to anybody.
Yeah,
but he didn't steal anything. He didn't. I don't know. It was weird.
Just
but I got
wanted
knocked
to
out.
impose violence on someone else.
Yeah, but I think it freaked him out that I got up and chased after him and he took off. But
that was you lived in LA for how long?
So we lived in LA for a little over 3 years. I want to say. I took a job out there.
Apple transferred right from the Apple here.
Yep, worked at Apple. Took a job out there at Apple. Wanted to like expand my career, and then just get a change of pace. I had a friend who moved from Albuquerque to LA and was like, "Hey, we have like work out here. You should come." So we just felt like it was the right time, and then we ended up staying a little longer. I think probably because we got into the foster care system. We met a friend. This friend of ours, they just adopted their son through foster care and shared their story. And we're like, so before my wife and I got married, we both had desires of like fostering and adoption. And so this came up and he told us the story. And so we used the same, I guess you can call it an agency. I don't know exactly the term, but we used
foster to adoption.
Exactly. And it wasn't foster to adoption per se. It was just foster with the possibility of adoption, which we knew like going into it, like, hey, we would love to adopt. If it happens, it happens. If not, awesome. We just want to give kids safe, loving homes. And so we did the whole thing and it kept us there. And the night actually we got placed with our foster son, you and Bree were there, and that was real special.
It was real special. We were visiting coincidentally, and you got placed with
a foster son.
Yeah, really awesome kid.
Yeah,
and which became a big traumatizing thing because you guys had him for a while, and
he eventually he's a baby when we got him, and we go through all this training and stuff, and it's like, okay, you can anticipate, you can do all this training to kind of anticipate what the process is going to be like. And then it actually happens. You're like, whoa, this is wild. Like not to diminish anybody's experience, but it's like, this little kid's 5 months old. He's dropped off at your doorstep, barely has a car seat that he fits in. And he's got a couple trash bags with all his possessions, his whole life in there. And I remember that night, like you and Bree helped us sort it out and like take inventory of it. And it was like, wow. Who are you? What's your story? He's soaked.
A person gets dropped off at your house.
Yeah.
So you're now responsible for this kid.
Yep.
Wild.
And so like, how do you not just like want to protect this child from the world and love
the psychology? Now you're like, oh, this is mine.
Yeah.
I'm responsible. And then this duty, this responsibility comes upon you.
Totally. And it's one of those things where you
love him.
What else does this kid need but just love? I mean, I can definitely give him a roof over his head, a safe environment, but he just needs love. He needs love. He needs just attention. He needs.
What were his circumstances before he got dropped off?
That's the thing is we don't entirely know. We get a little small glimpse of it, but there's a ton of ambiguity. And I think that's maybe by design, like they could tell us more. But we just know like small things like, hey, here's the interesting part is we got certified as foster parents. We were told, hey, there's this was when you're certified and you're said, hey, I'm willing to open up my home to any foster kids, you'll start getting calls. And so we got this call and it was like, hey, we've got this little boy. here's kind of a situation. We're going to come bring him over if you guys say yes. So we're like, yeah, of course, absolutely, bring him. And then something happened, and it was this interesting term, but it was a non-related, what was the term they said? It was a non-related family member is the term they used. A non-related family member said they will take him. So I imagine it was like a family friend or something, said, okay, we'll take him. So they took this little boy in. So we had started praying, and we're like, oh man, we would love to take this little boy. We know nothing about him. We literally know maybe just around the age he is, which was like 5 months, and that's it. And so we prayed for him, and we're anticipating him. We got a couple essential things, some diapers, maybe a few pieces of clothes. And then they said, well, okay, this non-related family member showed up and they're going to take him. So it was kind of like this, oh man, we were so looking forward to this. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't get a call for a couple of weeks, which is a surprise. And then 2 weeks later, they said, okay, we've got this other little boy. He was going to be placed in foster care. And then someone showed up, and it was a non-related family member. We're like, this is the same boy. And we kind of asked, and they're like, oh, we don't know. We don't know any of the situation. But are you guys interested? And we're like, yeah, of course. Like, we would love to take this little boy. I think after a little bit of investigation, we found out it was the same boy. So 2 weeks later, he showed up at our house. And so as you guys saw, he came in with all his possessions, and it's like, okay, now we've had all this training, but nothing is like, when this little human being is here and it's your job to take care of them. So no one can prepare you for that. I mean,
and you've been married for how long?
I want to say we were probably married at that point about 5 years, going on 6 years. Yeah.
And you get a kid dropped off that I've been anticipating for a long time. You're real excited about.
Yep.
How do you acclimate?
Yeah. So the whole process to get certified as a foster parent took a little over a year. And so I think we're anticipating becoming foster parents, and just being parents at this point, just for a while, just to love on a child and to give him a safe home and to train him up and to give him everything he needed. So much to the point where, we acclimate by just meeting this child's needs. And part of which was still seeing biological family, the biological family that he was detained from, which was hard because you're like, man, this little boy, so innocent. I want to protect him from the world. And he's experienced things that I wish I could have protected him from, but I would have never met him unless he was in this circumstance and detained from, a biological parent. And so I think, my wife and I were just so flexible in regards to what he needed and what, in regards to the system, we really had to work within the foster care system, our agency, all these different people involved. He had to do visitations with biological family still, so we participated in that. And it was a little tricky because I think we had to participate not just by allowing those visitations, but also being there and documenting those visitations by taking notes and things. These are the things that the state required, or the county at least. And so all we tried to do is just show up. Honestly, like that's all we really could do is just like, hey, how do we show up today? Whether it's a visitation day or whether it's just a fun day, let's go,
So why was this kid in the foster system?
Yeah. So I can't speak entirely to that in detail, but I can say that just he was detained. There was family that maybe could have stepped up and maybe did, but just couldn't
maintain the care.
The care. And so that was, it was hard because we, as foster parents didn't even entirely know, which was probably to our benefit because when we did these visitations with biological family, we didn't know why. And I think that allowed us to see the biological family in a lot of grace. Also at the same time, being cautious of like, okay, what do these interactions look like? And then also too, how do we as foster parents, because it's our responsibility now to train this child up. The agency we worked with was a Christian agency. And they had a lot of great trainings about like attachment. Because that's the thing is you got to think of a 5-month-old. And maybe it was abandonment. I don't know. I'm just hypothetically speaking. Maybe it was abuse. But like you can only imagine that even a 5-month-old, would know what it means to have attachment to an adult, to a human being, and not stray away from, what attachment looks like, showing affection, showing care. So I mean, that was our job, is like, we got to show this child affection. We got to train this child up. We got to love this child. We got to surround this child with community and, bring some normalcy to his life, essentially. So it's really easy to get so attached. And that's the part too, where like building attachment, whether or not
as foster parents,
whether he permanently ends up with us as our adopted son, or he goes back to his biological family, it's his job to learn how to attach, or it's our job to teach him what that means to attach. And it's a big responsibility, because there's other cases which are very hard and tricky where kids can never attach. They have something called RAD, where kids go through severe abuse and they have reactive attachment disorder, I think it stands for. So they really can't attach to anybody, and they can't show that.
This is the foster or the original?
This is just to anybody, really, even spouses. Like, I mean, we've seen and heard stories of people, kids who have been in the foster care system, and they grow up and try to live a seeming normal life, but they can't have any sort of attachment because
distrust.
Yes, distrust, the trauma that has occurred. And so, it's a lofty thing, to try. And by no means, are we perfect at it. But like my wife, I'm so proud of her, because she has done so much research, so much study, and these particular teachers, hey, how are these ways, learning, what are these ways to create attachment quick?
Gosh, what a wild thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's
to take on the holy task of parenting.
Yeah.
And have it be temporal.
Yeah.
So you had him for how long?
So we had him, I want to say, I honestly can't remember. It's a little bit of a blur, but maybe like a little less than a year. And we unified him with his biological dad, which was honestly a really great experience. And it was a great experience because this person, this man, just took full ownership, and he was like, "Yep, this is probably my son."
He didn't know.
He didn't know.
And so you guys, so he'd come to find out that this kid was his son while you guys were in the guardianship of this kid.
Yeah.
And he found out, and then he owned up and was like, okay,
yep,
I got to man up, and did, so that was
exactly. So we, my wife ended up just kind of taking initiative and reaching out to some of the, so whenever a child's in foster care, they basically do two things. They give the family member who has custody of the child just things they need to do if they were detained. Like, these are what we expect from you, and they're usually like court ordered. And then if there is another family member, they try to find out who that family member is, and saying, okay, well, we're going to do things like a DNA test. And so specifically the biological dad, they thought they knew who the biological dad was, and they were waiting. Things were just stuck in, systems and whatnot. And so my wife was just like, I know that we're waiting on certain things. I'm just going to make the move and call and be like, hey, what's the answer here? And I think there was a really smart move, because we want to advocate for unification. Like, if there is a dad who's willing to step up, yes, let's move towards that direction, versus like, let's prolong something that, maybe isn't the end goal. So, and maybe this is a little bit of an overshare, but I think my wife just did such a good job being like, I want to unify this boy with his little dad as soon as possible, if it's the right fit. And so she went through the process of calling and making these steps, and kind of to the extent of like, hey, we're waiting for this. Can you move this, these results forward? And so it pushed forward them actually being like, yep, it's confirmed. This is biological dad. And then connecting them. And then at that point, it was like, let's meet with him. Let's see what this is about. Obviously, like, you know, no matter what, this is going to be the eventual thing of unification, but let's ease into it. Let's set them up for success. And so we met with him multiple times, and it was just this really beautiful interaction where he, like I said, just took full ownership and being like, I will love this boy, and I will be his dad. And even though this is my current family situation, and you know, he had a family situation that was like, okay, sure, this is maybe a curveball to me. I will take full ownership. And then the game changer though was like, the thing that changes for me is I just need someone who believes in me. And we were that couple for him. We're like, I mean, especially even to like, I mean, I give so much credit to Brittany, my wife, who's just like, oh, I encouraged him. You can do this. We believe in you. You got this. He was doing all that he could to just even make his current family situation work. And then when that happened, he was optimistic, like, I can do this. Mm-hmm. I can do this. And even like the person I'm with, they're going to do this with me. And it was like just such a good situation. And so we ended up unifying him with his biological dad. And I think that was just such a big, awesome win for this little boy. Granted, it wasn't met without any heartache on our end, for sure. Mm-hmm. You know, even prepping on our end, you anticipate that, but you didn't realize how much you fell in love, you know, and how much you're like, man, I just want the best for this child. I know this is the best. And I could try to, you know, put it in this box of like, but you know, us versus our family versus this family, this would look better. This would be better. This, you know, or for their sake, this would be better. And it's like, no, like God's plan is that he be with his biological dad because he's willing to step up. And so, that was awesome. And we still keep in touch with them. Mm-hmm. And it's been...
Oh, you do?
Yeah, like 6 years now. And
how often do you guys...
I would say a couple times a year. We'll have some messages between us and their family, you know, via like
so you
Facebook
still kind of get to touch base with him?
Yeah, we'll get some pictures and stuff, which is
Dang.
Cool. Yeah, pretty awesome.
Wonder if there'll ever be a hangout.
Yeah, I would love to. I think we will make that happen. For a while after we unified, there was like a couple months where we just like hung out with them and, you know, spent time with them and babysat their kids and went to birthday parties before we moved.
A few years ago, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that was, and this is kind of maybe transitioning into like our life and my, you know, struggle with faith, but like before we left moving LA, so I would go to work every day. I had my job, and Brittany, she had a job, and then when we did foster care, she was just like, I want to do this full time. Like, I don't want to put this little boy in daycare. Like, this is my responsibility, and I feel God putting this on my heart. So I'm dedicated to loving and teaching this boy. So you can imagine that after we unified this little boy with his biological dad, leaving to work, at least for me, and leaving my wife in an empty home with an empty crib and still some toys.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a simulated child loss.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, is not to get morbid, because obviously like a very good situation came out of this, but like we mourned, and we were told like, you should mourn and it's going to be hard. And then you just get back on the horse and you keep going. Well, it was hard when you don't have family or friends, because we were living in LA with a few friends, but nothing like our closest friends, nothing like family who could just kind of like mourn with you. And so I probably jumped the gun and was like, hey, let's move back. Like, we've been here for like 3.5 years. Let's just go back. So we moved back. And it was actually kind of at that time where you were in Nashville, we were in LA.
We were conspiring to move back home at the same time.
At the same time. So we were kind of like, hey, let's kind of figure out plans together and move into this. And little did I know that having this reunification, as glorious as it was also so hard, because I think, one, we lost this little boy that we actually even saw like, man, there could be permanency, which we should have never anticipated. But like you imagine that, and then things happen and move fast. You're like, wow, I'm interacting with this little boy all hours of the day or a lot of my day, whenever I was home from work, I saw him as my son.
Yeah.
And then it's next
you invest your life
Yeah.
into a kid like that.
Oh, totally.
It's impossible not to have a bond.
Totally.
And so when that relationship is severed,
Yeah.
there's obvious mourning.
Yeah.
I imagine psychologically it feels like you're mourning the death.
Totally.
To a degree, with the optimistic view, of course,
Sure.
like the person, person's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just even like in a human instance of like just spending time and having a dynamic of like, oh, it's my wife, my son and I, and it's not anything like you never become a foster parent and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a little distance because I don't want to get attached. No, you're all in. You're like, this is my son. He's not my foster son. Like I never saw it that way. We're just like, no, this is my son. I love him. I cherish him. I'm fully invested. So, you're warned like, hey, whenever unification happens, because it's inevitable, or like, it was more rare to end up in adoption than it was to like, unify. Like unification was always the goal, which I appreciate that about the foster care system, because again, have that opportunity for a biological family to make what they've wronged right. I love that. But yeah, I'm still a human, and it impacted me pretty significantly. So I was dealing with not only just the loss of my foster son, but then also the feeling of failure moving back to Albuquerque. And I know it sucks because it's like, okay, well, Albuquerque moving back, it's like, oh, dude, we always see that land of entrapment, like, okay, you're moving back, so you probably just failed at what you did. And that wasn't the case, because we wanted to do foster care again and adoption again, but it's like, let's be around family. So we're mourning. We don't move back. We can't find it was a little hard to find an apartment or a house or anything like that moving back. So we moved back with my mother-in-law. And so she is so gracious to have us. But I think both my wife and I were both mourning, and we didn't know how to check on each other when you're both dealing with the same thing. When my wife, her dad passed, I could check on her because it wasn't my dad. I mean, sure, there's a level of closeness, but I'm like, man, how's it going? How can I be there for you? Because I'm not in the same place you are, but I'll empathize with you, or we're both in the same place. So we didn't know how to check in on each other. And so that was a really hard season where I glitched out for sure. I mean, really bad, to the extent.
So what was the timeline there? So you had, you and Brittany moved back in spurts, like in different segments, right? You stayed behind for a little bit with some of the gear. You were going to move back about a month later, or something along those lines, right?
Yep. So she moved back a little before me. I was wrapping up some things.
She started the business with Bree right then, my wife.
Yep.
So Bree and Brittany are in the same business. They're both hairstylists, so they started a business. Towns.
Yep.
Our hair shop.
We even did a trip right before we moved.
Yeah.
Right. And then we just had like a trip plan, because we went to Nashville.
Yeah, that's right.
We planned out our business and like next steps moving back to Albuquerque.
And so Brittany moves back, starts the business with Bree, but you didn't move back immediately.
No, I think I was maybe a month and a half behind her. I think I had a tie up. I think it was partially our lease with our apartment. Okay. And then I think also just wrapping up, I was trying to wait for a job offer coming back. I was trying to transfer back, and I was waiting for a couple like offer letters and stuff like that. So yeah, so she was before me for sure. So yeah, we had a little bit of separation there, which was good and bad. I remember just like packing up a lot of the house by myself and just being like having some definitely like mourning. Yeah. I don't even know if that was maybe, I think it definitely had started then. Like I was just kind of bummed. I was kind of just like feeling the sense of failure, maybe like, oh man, we're moving back to Albuquerque. I wanted to do so well.
So in the context of I imagine we shared this perspective to a degree. When you leave a small town, you go to a bigger place, LA, Nashville, whatever, and you have big ambitions, and then you end up either a change of heart, a change of motivations, you get married, whatever it is, and you're like, hey, I want to spend time around family. It feels like, oh, I failed. I've got to face my peers. and say, hey, look, my initial aims, I failed. So that's what you're explaining.
Yeah.
Some people might not understand. Like,
yep.
We're not in a small town, but it kind of feels like a small town.
Totally.
And when you go to LA, when you go to Nashville, when you go to wherever, with these big ambitious dreams or whatever you had, we had, it can feel like you're coming back as a failure and you're kind of like having a,
your tail between your legs.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, all right. Humbly, I come back and I bow my head and let's just figure this out. And then you have to like tell your story, right?
Sure. It feels like a big reset. Like, gotta start over.
You like run into your, old friends like, oh, you're back?
Yeah. I'm reinventing myself.
Yeah. I think I lied probably for a little bit. Like, dude, I'm just visiting. I'm a multimillionaire now and I'm living in the hills of Hollywood. No, I was not that at all. In fact, it was like one of those things where like, I think I hated seeing people for a little while and I kind of like hid. But I worked at a very public place, so I'm like, all right, I definitely have to figure out this story. So I put up a little bit of a front where it's just like, I didn't want to share that very personal part of my story of like our journey. Yeah. Well, and I think more than anything, I think I just felt like even through the foster care, just like wanting to share that. It's not my story to share. That's my foster son's story to share if he wants to share, So I don't even share all the details of what that looked like. But it's his story and I want that preserved. And if he wants to share it, he can share it. So to justify it, I gave, Cliff Notes. And I think the more and more like even to, Brittany got busy with the business, I got busy with work, we became more and more disconnected that we didn't even know how to share with each other. Like how do you check in on each other when you're both, what you're both are thinking, what you're both are feeling, you're devastated, you're sad, you're mourning, and there's layers to it. And you can't fight things out. Like when sometimes you just need to have a yelling kind of moment in your marriage. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm at my mother-in-law's house.
So you're coming back and you're discouraged.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
The foster thing, you're coming off of the end of that. And then you're coming back home and you're just feeling like, what am I doing? So you're bummed.
Yeah.
And then your 30th birthday comes up and you go into like,
famous.
Yeah, depression mode, frustration mode, roast me mode.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So to give some context.
That's great.
It was a gosh. it was rough.
It was fun. I mean, well.
Yeah. Well, to give some context. So yeah, I ended up, getting back into like, okay, I've got to go back to work. We're starting this business. I'm coasting, and then I'm like, this lie creeps into my mind, like, man, this little boy, like, what, like, God, why did you even allow this for this season? I mean, I know what I signed up for, but like, why did you allow this? And it sounds stupid, like when I say it now, because I know what I signed up for, and I knew the potential that it was going to be, but like, the idea was that the potential for that life was ultimately most important, and I should have been more sacrificial when I was more selfish, wanting permanency, figuring, man, I'm 30 years old. I should be in a place of starting a family, having a life, having a career, having all these things. There was a selfish element to that for sure. I think the motives through it were pure. And then I think Satan attacked me and I just fed into these lies. And so, of course, I self-medicated. And my self-medication was like, I started drinking heavily. I was like smoking weed and on this journey of like, I don't know, discovering like who God really was, quote unquote, when I'm like, I knew he was. I asked some of my closest friends, one of my best friends, Chad, like, hey dude, don't hold me accountable anymore. I don't want you to hold me accountable anymore, which was like this pinnacle moment in time where I just remember being like, I just stepped out of this circle of like, hey, you're being loved and you're mourning and we're doing our best to mourn with you. And you asked point blank for us to stop because you just want to be selfish. And so I did. And I remember, friends just being like, still, like you were still pursuing me, but like also granting my wish. Like, okay, if this is really what you want, I'm not going to like, bend your arm to be my friend. And so, it ended up turning into like me literally pursuing my my worst desires. Funny enough that like this very good thing turned into a thing that became so introverted, so introspective, and so selfish, to the extent of like, I'm now, again, heavily drinking, smoking weed, exploring humanitarian ways of life, because I think that's a better way of living than Christianity. And then eventually having an emotional affair on my wife with the girl at work, and thinking like, oh, I'm like, I don't even know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking. That's the hard part about it all, is like, I look at it now and be like, man, I mean, I'd probably be in a worse off place if it wasn't for friends like you, if it wasn't for the grace of my wife, if it wasn't certain people, like just even to thinking about like some of the conversations we had, and like just getting slapped in the face a bit and just being like, dude, just wake up. Like, what are you doing? Like shaking me to this point of realization, and thinking like, man, why did I take something so good and make it so selfish so quickly? And it was this like, woe is me mentality. And it was like this very pinnacle point in my life where I was just like, man, I think, you know, my wife and I was like, man, we're probably going to get a divorce. Two, like I just am so, I don't know if the word even deconstructing, I think that was the first time I like even understood what that, or not even understood, but explored what that word was, like deconstructing my faith, and like, oh, making it a crutch, like, oh my, because I went to this church, or because I did X, Y, and Z, or because this pastor said this is why I'm like this. And then realizing like, dude, take ownership, like be a man. And so, it led to a point where my wife being so gracious, like I was caught in just having this relationship with this girl, this work relationship that became more than work relationship. And it was, you know, it was an emotional affair for sure. And like it coming to the light, and I probably wouldn't have owned it if it didn't. And I think that was like point blank, like, dude, what are you doing? I remember the time where I was caught, and then it became like an intervention to some extent, like with some of my family and my wife and, you know, you guys. And I was confronted with it. And I think I was just still being kind of stubborn in it, to the point where it's just like, man, if I want any sort of future, if I want any sort of, I mean, gosh, even just to like ever, for the hope and dream that I wanted and first saw a little glimpse of it in LA, as being a man who fears God, who has a wife and kids, and is obedient to God, and have preservation and longevity in my life, I've got to repent. And it was something where I think I fought it for a little while, and was just like, man, I need this. I want this. And so like over the next couple months, I started sharing more and more with my wife, you know, what had been shared, what I shared, you know, even like emotionally with this other girl, what I had felt through the process of this loss, what I even had held over the heads of my friends, you know, over you or Bree, or our business, over our, even just like thinking about like just my walk with the Lord, and how I used it and weaponized it against other people, how I was raised, how the church we went to beforehand, you know, all these different things. And then it just kind of came to this point of like, dude, just be a man, own it. You messed up, and all you can do is just own it and move forward. And by owning it, look like repenting. And, you know, again, by God's grace, through the graciousness of my wife and my friends, were just like, you've always been welcome in this fold. Like, come be a part. Like, you've never been cast out. You don't have to earn your being a part anymore. Just own your sin and move on. And I just remember these moments of like, man, I feel like I still got to earn, you know, the favor of my wife and my friends. And then just slowly but surely being like, man, God's grace is so sufficient. So move forward, keep moving forward. And like, I don't know. I mean, my wife and I hit this point where we're just like, you know, at this point, I think we're like maybe 7 years married, and 7 years married, and we hit our honeymoon stage for the first time ever, because, you know, we started marriage kind of in a little bit in a slump, and it was like this part. But I think what's funny is I was like a young man going into marriage and not also knowing how to take ownership, being a man, take ownership, repent. And so at this point, I mean, 7 years of marriage, I'm just so glad it was 7 years in versus never, right? Yeah. And so we hit this honeymoon stage.
You know what strikes me real quick?
Yeah.
I think what a lot of people will get to is a point of difficulty of their sin or whatever it is, and they'll find it's like a bridge they see. I'm like, I don't want to cross that. I have to confess. I have to come clean. I've got to own this. I've got to learn this. I've got to do this. Marriage, parent, whatever it is. And they turn back. I don't want to cross that bridge. Turning back.
Yep.
I commend you, because it's not easy.
No.
You know, to own whatever. But awesome. So I want to note that. I think a lot of people can relate to that idea, and a lot of people might even be struggling with something like that, right? Where they got something that they need to get past. But what's cool is that you hit a honeymoon stage after that, because you had that truth. We talked about it at dinner. We were talking about how trust in every relationships requires trust.
Yeah.
Well, when you insert trust back into your relationship with your wife, it's no wonder that you guys fell in love.
Yeah.
Again.
Yep. It's like that whole idea of like to be fully loved and to be fully known and to like be exposed. I mean, I think in part like it's shameful when you're exposed.
Sure.
But like when you're like, okay, this is who I am, and I'm going to stand before you. Just, this is who I am. And I think it's a big thing, especially for men, like pride, right? I've been reading this book about like what it looks like in marriage, and like marrying the most perfect spouse or marrying the most perfect partner is not a thing, but to see their potential of who they're going to become in Christ. And so what you do is you stand there just in all your shame. And like, it's hard. It's brutal. It's a brutal thing, because you're just like, man, but I want them to see me like, you know, Ryan Gosling and Barbie, or I don't know, the most perfect alpha male that could sweep them off the feet. And you're like, man, that's not what marriage is about. Like, marriage is about doing life together, seeing someone in light of who God created him to be, and then also their potential in Christ, all because the purpose is to become more holy. Mm-hmm. And it's brutal. It's super brutal, especially if you think you have anything going for you. I think I lived a lot of life thinking like, oh man, I can contribute because I'm X, Y, and Z. I'm somebody. I mean, back to our other conversations, if it's going to be in here about like the band stuff, where it's like, dude, I want to be somebody. I am somebody. I can contribute. I'm X, Y, and Z. So I'm a hot commodity or whatever. And then you go into marriage, you're like, dude, I'm not. Like, in fact, I'm probably more detrimental to you because of my sin. But like, obviously the Lord has put us together, and what God has put together, and what felt so ordained, like let no man separate. And I think that was so profound, at least for us. And I think it's something I still have to wrestle with, is like, put the pride away, humble yourself.
I think you do a really good job at that.
I don't think so.
From what I observe, Aaron's a great servant to his wife, more than I to mine. And so I must commend you. You know, it's interesting though, because me and Bree, to point that out, marriage, relationships, ironing each other out. When I first was in, Bree and I first started, we were like totally different people. And I don't know how much I helped her, whatever, but I can assuredly tell you that she helped me point out my flaws in a good way, in a healthy way, and helped me grow, believed in me, persevered with me, called me out many times, And if you can, that's the beauty of marriage, right? Is if you can stand it, if you can remain in that fire, in that tension, and not lose hope, and stay productive and stay healthy within that framework, you're going to be a better person. You're going to improve. You're going to become a better husband, a better wife, better companion, and therein have a more pleasant relationship.
Yeah.
Be more pleasant to one another and productive and efficient and loving and joyful and all of the fruits of the Spirit. If you can persist, if you can deny your pride, if you can deny your sin, and continue, confess and, continue in that whole battle. That's the beauty of marriage, though, is outside of that, I could always tell this. I remember when I was in Nashville, it was a very vivid moment where I would I worked in this side restaurant. It was called Table 3, and I worked in the cookie shop on the side. Very bare. Rarely anybody would come in, but occasionally a man would, or somebody would come in and buy a cookie or something. But I remember having this thought when one guy came in. He seemed very well-rounded, very soft around the edges, like very, what would the word be? Kind of composed, he had something about him, a gentlemanliness about him. And I looked at his ring finger because I just was starting to guess, like, he's not married, he's married. And you could tell a demeanor difference in your average man. And I started to notice these things, like, oh, that guy's married. Oh, that's a sign of his marriage, his demeanor. It's not that he's castrated. Now you could see that, and it's an unhealthy thing as well. It's that he's not a loose Mustang. He's not just going crazy. There's something beautiful about composition, being composed, and I think marriage will do that to you. And I started to notice that, and it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yep.
You see it in unmarried men be very untamed.
Yep.
Very reckless, very vulgar, very whatever it is. And that's why God says it is good for man. It is not, what does he says? It's not good for man to be alone.
Mm-hmm. I definitely saw that in certain people, especially when I think that was one of the other things. I mean, there was a few things that was like very prominent in that season of being in the valley, just being in total despair and just, blatantly walking away from the Lord and seeing certain things. And I think I did notice that right away, like men who are married and devout to their wives. And I saw that in you. I saw that in some older men. I saw that in people that I was like, man, there's something respectable about that. And then saw other men that was like, especially guys that I worked with who were like supposedly married or, older men. And the way they would act was like, man, that's kind of shameful and embarrassing. And I almost feel like I'm acting more that way than the other way. And I remember just being like, man, I don't want that. And I don't know what I need to do, but it seems like just repent and let the Lord change my heart, because I think there's something so beautiful and cherish. There's something to be cherished of marriage. And I remember like even coming out of that season in repentance and be like, man, there's something so precious here. 7 years, maybe it's full of certain hardships, not perfect, but also not all bad. And it was like, there's work and time and effort put into this. This is very precious. And, now we're at a point where, we have a son we've adopted who's about to turn 4, and we have a daughter who's 4 months. And it's like, wow, they wouldn't be here unless we persevered and God's grace. And I also think
crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
No, oh man, it's mind blowing. And I think like where I'm at now.
Praise God.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. It's totally a testament to the Lord's sovereignty and grace. I think about where I was and where I am now, and like the richness of just becoming.
I know firsthand the hardships you guys have endured. It is awesome to think and put it in that perspective, in that context. You guys have a beautiful son, a beautiful daughter. Awesome. Yeah. Praise God.
Totally. Praise God awesome. For sure. I will say, I mean, anybody who is maybe struggling with something similar, and again, it may not be an emotional affair. It could be a physical affair. It could be an affair with anything that is not your wife. And
from last week's episode, work, right? Yeah. Matt fooled me with that one.
Yeah.
An affair with work. Yeah.
Yep. With his dad.
7-Eleven.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember him sharing that story with me and being like, huh, I could see, I mean, I could go down that path. We all could, you know, but I think that the two biggest things that I am continually reminded of is like, one, like get rid of the pride, you know, like just drop the pride, repent, humble yourself, bring yourself as you are to your wife. And it's something that I'm still figuring it out because I'm so prideful. I think it's one of those things where I think like I got all the answers because I'm a man, or because I've read more of the Bible, or because I listen to more podcasts. Like my wife is so spiritually mature that I think even just being like, look, I'm struggling. Here's what it is. And you know, even that happened recently, like I'm being so impatient with you, and just like realizing the sanctification for her and myself that comes through that, where we fight it out, where we look to the gospel. And then I think the biggest thing is community. I mean, you were one of the biggest advocates in my life. I shared the story about the foster son and his biological dad, and what he needed is just someone who believed in him, for him to be like, oh yeah, I can take that step, and I could be this to this boy. And I think that was the thing that you did a lot for me, is like, hey, I still believe in you. Even though you like are pushing me away, I still believe in you. And I was just like, I can do this. And it's funny because like, I think I've adopted so many of your just beliefs and perspectives on family and legacy. And it's kind of cool because I think we've come to this really awesome crossroads where you're one of my best friends. And I like see how our lives have modeled to each other to form, to even like having the business now for like 6 years. That's a cool thing. But then like the families, you know, we signed a lease and we're like, oh, it's so crazy when we sign this lease, when it's over, our kids are going to be 5. We're like, that's so wild. No way. That'll never happen. And it's like, wow, we're there. And it's like, but not only that milestone, but like the little things that have happened, you know, the trenches we've went through. And so it's not like just like the trenches personally with all this stuff from, you know, the last, you know, 6 years. I mean, we've known each other way longer than 6 years, but I feel like it's been that period of like 6 years and now.
It's been warfare for the past 6 years in many ways, not just friendship wise, but like in many of our family wise, culture wise.
Culture, business, everything, to the point where like, okay, we're here now. We're stronger than we've ever been. And we have this like longevity and legacy and mentality of like, let's do this. Like we're lifers. I always say that, like, I'm a lifer with you. And we think about like, okay, so how are we doing this for the well-being of our families, our marriage, our businesses, our, you know, just the community around us. And so, yeah, there's cool things happening.
Well, I could say many of the, thank you for your compliments and your kind words, of course. And I could say the same for you. I think you are, and have shared, you know, in the closest friend, you definitely my closest friend for what, 15 years now?
15 at least.
Yeah, it's been a crazy time, but I appreciate you bearing with me through all the craziness, dude. It's been nuts.
We've had some, we could probably do a whole podcast about all the bullshit. I mean, there's been times where I've like kicked Chad out of like small groups to like, I mean, we've had a bunch of stuff to the point where we're just like,
we've endured a lot of drama.
Yeah. But I think, and then we've had some of like the richest and deepest memories. And I think that's what's so cool about like, I mean, I don't know. It's funny. I'm going to call you out, Course, but I remember like Course and I talking and be like, dude, I need someone in my life like you and Chad have had, because we've gone through, you know, we have history, but it's like these deposits, and it's like the hard things too. Even like, dude, we have gone through seasons where it's been like, oh man, we've been on a little bit of thin ice, but then realizing as we grow more mature, those are good things. And every relationship should have some of those moments of like, conflict, because I think avoiding conflict, especially in the Christian world, for me, it's like, oh man, there's a stigma to that. We got to avoid conflict at all costs. And I still struggle with that. We're like, I don't want to bring this up. And then Chad's just like, dude, bring it up because we need to talk about this. That's truth. Or even if it's not truth, we'll go to truth. Yeah. We'll go to scripture and let's hash this out. And then we're a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so good.
A true friend will endure past the fight.
Yeah.
That's what's cool about real friends. I remember seeing a video of like a couple friends a long time ago. It was like some weird viral Instagram video. And I was like, they're like FaceTime, a couple buds, just like FaceTime each other. And just, I don't know what, it just represented to me like friendship. I was like, that's so weird. I didn't grow up with a brother, close brother. My brother's 7 years older than me. And we weren't necessarily companions necessarily. We love each other. And so I kind of grew up very independent. And so I've had a couple friends throughout my life. This Brian in high school, my cousin Patrick who passed, and then you, who were just kind of like, you were the first closest friend when I came to the Lord, when I really came to the Lord, and brought me into the whole crew. It was that whole like thing. And then you and I just, for whatever, I think it's our similar backgrounds or similar culture or similar interests, we just bonded. And so you represent to me that real tight brother that we never, we're not blood, but I think the Lord brought us together.
Yeah.
And said, hey, you guys are going to live life together. You guys are going to figure it out. You're going to mature. You're going to fight, and you're going to endure the hardships of life together. Figure it out.
Yep.
Love each other, stand for each other, encourage one another when you have low moments. And I still have tendencies of wanting to be very independent, but I thank you for your friendship.
No, absolutely. I think it's something too where like, one of the things that is so by design and then God created is like to have the regularity between brothers, to just like, because I think that was the times where we grew most distant, was like when we didn't see each other often or didn't talk often. And it's fun because like now that we, live in the same city, or we're like, it's so cool actually. Our kids are going to be in the same class together. And it's like, oh dude, I hope the same for our kids. But at the very least, it's like we need that togetherness to, you can't have growth unless you have conversation and you live life amongst each other. And I think it's so funny and cliche, like when people are like, oh, we're going to live life live life with each other. It's like, what does that exactly mean? I'm like, well, I could show you an example. And we have a pretty good example of that.
Yeah. You can't be real tight friends with your brother unless you can call him a little bitch sometimes.
That's
from time
true.
to time.
Even
you know what I mean?
It still makes me cry.
I don't think I've ever said that, but
no, it's true.
But one day I will.
I think you just did, and it's documented. But
maybe we should end it there.
Yep.
Thank you, Aaron, for coming on. That was fun.
Heck yeah.
We covered a lot of things.
We did. Thanks, Chorus.
Love you, Chorus.
This is a great show, guys.
Love you, bro.
All right. Love you. Bye.